Good morning. I would like to speak about the rebuilding of the Temple of God on Mount Zion, or the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, concerning the end time events. In fact, this is perhaps one of the most contentious issues in eschatology, whether the temple of God will be rebuilt either just prior to the coming of Jesus Christ or at the coming of Jesus Christ. My brothers and sisters, we will look at the direct passages that speak about the temple. For me, in the New Testament, there are at least 4 passages that speak directly about the existence of the temple of God during the last days. From the Gospel of Matthew, in chapter 24, we hear about Jesus telling his disciples that there will be an abomination of desolation being set up in the holy place. That is a reference to the book of Daniel, but the phrase the holy place can only be a reference to the temple of God in the last days, as the context of Matthew 24 shows that just before the coming of Jesus Christ, a person will set up an abomination of desolation in the holy place, and that is the beginning of the period called the Great Tribulation. It is also repeated somewhat in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 13, and there's this addition of "let the readers read," a phrase that is very important in the eschatological sense, in that we must pay careful attention to this prophecy or to this statement concerning the temple of God. The third occasion where the temple of God is mentioned is in Paul's letter to the Thessalonians, in the second letter to the Thessalonians chapter 2, where Paul mentions about several events or persons that will appear in the end time before the gathering together or coming of the Lord Jesus Christ, or the day of the Lord, according to the Apostle Paul. And he says that this man will sit in the temple of God, claiming himself to be God and demanding worship to himself or an image of himself in the temple. My brothers and sisters, I do not think we should spiritualize the phrase the temple of God is found in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, because in the common reading of the verse, a man will sit in the temple of God claiming to be God, and that surely is a physical temple, and that temple will be built in Jerusalem in the last days preceding the parousia, or the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. The final occasion where the temple of God is mentioned is in the book of Revelation, in chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, and where John is commanded by the angel to take a rod and measure, and there are 3 things that John measures. He measures the temple of God, the altar, and those that worship in it. And it's a clear reference to the temple of God. And it goes on to say that for the period of 42 months, nations will tremble on the holy city and the outer courts of the temple. I can't interpret it any other way except that this is a physical temple in Jerusalem, because the nations shall be trembling on the holy city and the outer courts of the temple. It is not an heavenly temple, because the nations are on earth and they cannot tremble on a temple if it's a heavenly temple or a spiritual temple. So you have it, my brothers and sisters, a short discussion on the temple of God in the New Testament, and I believe that the temple of God will be rebuilt in the last days, just prior to the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, his second coming, and we shall see that rebuilt in the Temple Mount in the holy city, Jerusalem.